The modern healthcare system won't help you heal.
It's designed to keep you sick and dependent on drugs.
If you want to get well, you got to get out of the system.
You found Predictive Health Clinic.
Join us as we get well and stay healthy.
Welcome, folks. Thanks for joining us. This is the Predictive Health Clinic podcast. I am joined today by Dr. Ben Bocchicchio, who, when I interviewed him for Dr. Ovadia's show, I think I referred to him as the OGest of the OGs in the metabolic health space. I don't know anybody who's been talking about what you've been talking about longer. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for dropping in here.
Yeah, we made it, Jack.
Give us a quick 2 minutes, who you are and why folks should listen to you.
I'll leave it up to them as to why, but I've been in the field for over 50 years, was one of the original low-carb guys in the 70s, and have been pretty much sticking to that for personal, professional, and academic reasons. It seems to work for most people. I started off as a guy training athletes and training people doing exercise who wanted to get leaner. I always thought my business was body composition. People wanted to get leaner, more muscle, less fat. And that pretty quickly morphed into health applications and applications for cardiac and orthopedic rehab. And at an early age, by the time I was like 27, I had a number of facilities going, and I was considered to be, the New York press said I was a guru when I was 27, so that's almost 50 years ago. So I have no idea what I could be at this point, but
that's a pretty young guru.
Yeah. And so some people think I'm my own son or something, but no, I've been doing this, presenting for, like I said, 5 decades. I remember being the young buck at the big meetings and things like that, and now I'm the old dude, but I'm still plugging along. And basically, the last 15, 20 years been concentrating on metabolic health, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, prevention, recovery from therein, and things like that. So that's where I am. So I'm known as the exercise guy, but I have a second PhD in health. So I have a little bit of a background in that also. Whatever works.
One of the things that fascinates me about you is you've got the vibe of a gym bro musclehead, and I mean that in a very positive way. To me, that is a positive thing.
Yeah.
The gym bros, those guys aren't much for theory. They only care about what actually works.
Yeah.
And yet, on the other hand, you can dive really deep into the biochemistry of what's going on in our bodies. So I really dig that about you. I talk to a lot of academics, and I like the guys who apply it.
I try to present this. I have a saying that if you really know your material, you could present it at the highest level of scrutiny in the academic world, and you could also present it to a 4th grade class. So I try to keep it, even when I do a scientific presentation, I present some science, I present some citations, but all of us, I think, at whatever level, want to understand on a conceptual basis, on just a base level, what does this mean? What does it mean for me? What does it mean for my clients or patients? And I think that's my strength, is I can take that stuff, I can go to the molecular level with mitochondrial interpretation that nobody has yet, in my opinion, gotten into. And I can just tell you exactly how I think it would work best for you to apply that knowledge to your benefit.
And this is why I really dig you. Okay, so the point of this show, we want to focus on one health issue that you've got expertise in, whatever that may happen to be, so that our listeners who are either suffering from whatever problem you're addressing or want to prevent whatever problem you want to talk about are able to do. So what's the issue you'd like to bring to our audience today?
Well, generally, I think a lot of us in this space, like I even said in some of my presentations, in this cult, and I mean that in a good way, even though some people, I think, have imbibed in a little too much of the Kool-Aid. But what we're really looking at is what we call metabolic health. Okay, and what does that mean? Metabolic health is really is what's going on in our bodies and our organ systems that keeps us vigorous, carefree, being able to resist intrusions like pathogens and viruses and stresses and things like that. And that's what I think health is. I think of myself as a person who wants to drive health even more than wants to recover from illness. I think, the medical field does a lot of that. And I have done that, of course, people that were really considered, quote, sick. But I think most of us strive to go from that everything's okay, not too bad level to the other side of the fuel gauge, to wanting to be healthy, vigorous, enjoying life, not having impediments and restrictions. And in the long run, literally in the long run, that's what longevity is all about. Staying healthy, being resistant to intrusion for as long as we can, right up until the end. The title of my book that I'm writing now is Get Strong, Live Long, and Die Laughing. Okay, so getting strong is, it's one of my bailiwicks, keeping muscle strength for a number of reasons. And I have a muscle-centric kind of a perspective or bias with regard to physiology and health. And I have had great success, fortunately, using that structure, that psychological structure of, if you are strong physically, then you are usually strong in a health manner, strong psychologically and behaviorally. The application, I've delivered presentations on the muscle system and the power of its signaling for weight loss, for fat loss, for reversal of disease, for longevity, for performance, And so I come from that standpoint. So understand, I am first an exercise physiologist, but in order to be an exercise physiologist, you have to be a physiologist. And then you have to know about physiology on steroids, meaning what happens when the body is active, when all of these systems are being taxed and stressed, and how do they respond and recover from those stresses?
All right. So typically what I ask at this point is, what got you interested in this? I still think that's a worthwhile question.
Okay. I mean, I was always interested in sports and the training for sports. My family had generations of trainers and coaches and teachers and professors, and I was just naturally leaned to and was eager to learn all about this kind of stuff. So I took my degrees, and my bachelor's degree was in phys ed, health, and science. And my master's was in stress and kinesiology and body movement. My first PhD was muscle physiology, and my second was health with a specialization in exercise. And I did postdoctoral work in body composition and weight management. So I've always been in that. And plus, I've had facilities. By the time I was 27, I had 7 facilities: fitness centers, cardiac rehab, low back orthopedic rehab. And I was a consultant because I was one of the first, it's a good description you have of me. I mean, I intentionally have not lost my D's, Dems, and Do's, from Brooklyn, so I could come off as a regular person. But if somebody wants to challenge me academically or scientifically, I think I can withstand pretty good scrutiny, which is fine. But I think you don't have to talk like a scientist to get across the concepts that are beneficial that we derive from the science that we study.
Especially with something with daily, hour by hour applicability in our lives, our health. Okay, so let's go to the subject at hand. What are the most common misconceptions that you are forced to address when you're working with folks?
The problem, one of the problems I feel now, Jack, is that there's so much information out there, and I use information loosely, that it's very difficult for people to try to understand who they should listen to, because you could, and now even in the literature, okay, if you review literature, and I've read thousands of studies, okay, there are so many studies now that I really believe if you have a concept, and it could come out of left field about physiology and health, that you can find a study that would back up whatever this bizarre concept is. In other words, there's so much stuff going on that you literally, I think the most difficult problem for anybody is, where do I get reliable information that's not biased or selling something that I can apply to myself that has a good bang for its buck, as opposed to just try this. And there's a study that shows that if you take this, then, you're going to, whatever's going to happen is going to happen wonderfully and to a great magnitude. But I mean, some of this stuff comes back to simplicity. Okay. What is health? Health is again, vigor. Health is resistance to intrusion, disease, pathogens, viruses, and all the things that degenerate or limit or impede us being optimally functioning. So I think that, to me, is what I try to be, is reliable. I try to be well-read, which I think I am. And I align myself with people that are kind of like-minded. A guy like Phil, I mean, I like these people. I was a lone wolf for many years because what I was preaching, and I was very successful, by the way. I made a lot of money doing this, and to me, it was never a job. I mean, I was just lucky. But I said, this is the way you should eat for most people most of the time. This is how you should exercise. This is how you should conduct your life to give you the best shot of having the highest level of health and vigor for a long period of time for most people. That's my basic philosophy.
All right, then let's distill it down then. Is there a heuristic that our listeners can use to help separate the wheat from the chaff, to separate this is real from this is probably a fad or maybe even worse?
I think number one, don't or be skeptical about listening to people that are selling you something at the end of the show. Okay. Right away, right there.
True.
Okay? Be skeptical, understand where these people come from and who they work for. Okay. Do they work for Big Pharma? Are they involved in the food industry? Is there some political direction? I mean, and again, you have to be a little bit skeptical because there are a lot of people making a lot of money, fooling a lot of people a lot of the time. And I feel bad about that. And I try as much as I can I try to be the opposite of that. This is information for you. If you've got a better way to do whatever it is that I'm suggesting and it's working for you, forget Dr. Ben. Okay, don't worry about it. If it's working for you, you're healthy, your doctor says you're good, you're happy with it, keep doing it. Is my way the only way? Of course not. Most people in the world never heard of me. However, there are now supposedly 1 million people that do my training on a regular basis around the world. So somebody's listening, or either that or I've been fooling 1 million people for 50 years, which is also admirable. But, that's a good point. Oh, yeah, But basic common sense, okay? Like Dr. Phil talks about, like we talk about in the low carb or in the COSI. I just spoke at COSI with Feldman's group in Vegas. These guys are scientists. Most of them have no skin in the game. And if they do, they tell you what it is. They're trying to provide information from what they study and what they observe. And I've got 50 years of clinical observation with tens of thousands of people. So this stuff works most of the time for most people. And that's the best I can offer. And then the expertise, the nuance comes from me as a practitioner to hone this into your particular circumstance. And there are outliers and things like that. And that's kind of the fun of me staying in this for 50 years is every person's a little bit of a puzzle that I try to solve. And maybe I've seen this 150 times, 200 times before, but that person is just a little bit different. And it's fun people say you do the same thing and say the same thing over and over. Do you get tired of it? Not really, because for that person, it might be the first time they've ever heard it. And it may just make the light bulb go off in their head for the first time. And that's kind of cool to see. To me, it's kind of fascinating. It's not like work. And I get, obviously I get something out of it because I keep doing it. Why not?
Define a couple of things for us. When you talk about low carb, quantify that for us. What does that mean?
I would prefer for most people controlled carb. Okay, because low carb is a relative term, and relative to what the standard is now, or the average is now, it's not, you wouldn't consider it low carbohydrate. In other words, we have to control energy. Metabolism, metabolic health is all about energy. The acquisition, the digestion, the assimilation, the storage, the wasting of energy. That's what metabolism is all about. So if we understand that eating is a big part of that, Expending energy is a big part of that. Storing energy is a big part of that. And regulating that balance between taking in energy, utilizing it, storing it, okay, wherever in a healthy manner is really the basis of metabolic health. And why is metabolic health important? Because anymore, we don't die of things that we catch. You don't, and these diseases, these conditions, you don't catch diabetes, you don't catch obesity, you don't catch heart disease. These are primarily behavioral and usually long-time behavioral responses. Understanding that, the logical approach would be, how do we alter our behavior in such a way that we diminish the likelihood of these things being critical, and we increase our chances of health and vigor and enjoying life as we're physically, genetically probably capable.
So what does controlled carb mean in practical terms?
It's really controlled energy. Again, because if we have an abundance of energy, which we can't store in a healthy manner, in a healthy space, which is probably fat cells for the most part, then we can get into problems because the body now has to overcompensate, and we rock the boat called homeostasis. Homeostasis really is like a vacillating equilibrium. It's not a flat line, but so you want to stay within a healthy range of yin and yang, hot and cold, things like that. That's how the body operates. When that balance is off, it becomes imbalanced. One side of the seesaw is up too high and it stays there. Then there are negative ramifications. There are impediments to high functioning. There are problems. There are inflammation is another big issue. But all of these things can be addressed in almost every case, rather than by the application of an anti-inflammatory, an anti-this, or some medication to offset or overcome some imbalance by creating another imbalance that hopefully net balances this thing. So the body wants to drive healthy homeostasis, wants to drive health. I mean, a healthy body, I mean, a person who's not diseased or afflicted in some way, which is unfortunate, can drive the repair. When we heal, most of what we heal, the methodology of healing comes directly from the body's responses. The pharmaceutical interventions or whatever these treatments are, in most cases, just allow us to have a better shot of our body correcting its own issues. Okay. So if we start from that standpoint, and I think I don't know that there's much discrepancy. I don't think there's much controversy about what I just said. So if we allow the body to heal itself, then we can have a less imposition of ill health, less degradation. So what is that? There are a few levers we can pull. Number one lever, probably in this state, at least behaviorally, is diet. Am I eating so that I get energy required to fulfill all my needs and have some spare energy stored in a healthy place that doesn't impose on my other organ systems? Okay. Number two is exercise and activity. So all of these things, if you think about it, I mean, really down to the bottom line, it's procreation. It's the continuation of the species. We have to have energy. We have to have enough of it so that our hormones are fertile enough to reproduce and carry on. We have to now somehow, as primitive man, we had to go seek that energy. So we had to have a muscle system and a brain coordinated enough to exert the high levels of energy and have that storage for usage so we could get food. I mean, we know that. So those things are necessary. You need to have food. You need to have energy. You need to store it and use it. Okay. And we have this reliance on muscle activity. This is part of our hardwired DNA. All right. This is genetic. So if we could control those two things, if we can regulate them, if we can take advantage of systems that are not incredibly intrusive in our modern lifestyle, then we're a long way towards remaining healthy or regaining health. So what kind of diet? A diet that doesn't overload us with energy, a diet that allows us to store energy. And in most cases, in modern civilization, modern environment, it means controlling carbohydrates seem to have the most deleterious effect if we are not balancing them pretty regularly. Now, does it mean that you can't eat some carbohydrate? Many people can, many people do well with them. But a lot of people, more and more, seem to have trouble. I mean, the rates of diabetes and directly affected obesity, heart disease, and Alzheimer's disease are enormous. And you can see a trajectory in the elevation of carbohydrate intake and all of these disorders. And again, what we come down to, not to get too deep in the weeds, is insulin resistance.
Yeah.
So what regulates how our body operates is how our hormones dictate that the chemistry going on in our body is healthy and balanced. Insulin is a very powerful survival hormone. It is actually a hibernation hormone, and it's necessary when we have a lack of food and we can't go out and get food, say in the middle of the winter. That's what that, and that survived, the development of man. Okay, that's genetic. But however, now when there's an overabundance, let's just imagine us as a primitive man, and we have a bunch of just freshly dead animals standing outside our door, and the middle of the summer, berries and fruits and things, and in abundance, we wouldn't have had to have developed this powerful insulin hormone to be so overwhelming, because we wouldn't have needed it. We've had enough energy available, but we don't. So now the energy availability is insane. It's pervasive, and we can't really our brains will not allow us to overcome this without some structure and organization.
Say more about that structure and organization.
Okay.
Overcoming that instinctive drive.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
not the instinctive drive is when we are exposed to high energy foods, whether they be fats, whether they be sugars. Okay. Our brain tells us, scoop that stuff up because you're not going to have it for very long.
Right.
And so we have these drives. Why are they so satisfying? Why do they drive us to eat more than we really need as far as a pure energy source? Because our brain tells us that we better store this stuff, because traditionally, when I mean for thousands of years, we didn't have access. We were going to have sparsity. Okay, so that the brain has developed these attributes, okay, that says, hey, store this high energy, this dense energy, because we're going to need it later. But we don't need it later anymore. We don't even need that high energy. And as a result, because the brain drives us to enjoy this, okay, for survival, now what happens is we're eating for pleasure, which is, a brain-driven situation. But unfortunately, we can't compensate through activity or basal metabolic rate or burning this energy. So the energy has to be stored in places where it doesn't belong, and it literally gums up the works in fatty liver, fatty heart, fatty blood vessels, fatty muscles. These things, there's just too much energy for us to store in a healthy manner. Therefore, we become reliant on depositing this fat somewhere where it doesn't belong. It literally gunks up the works, okay? And now we have organ failure. We have depression of function. And so when I say energy and I say controlled carbohydrates are fine. Some people live without them entirely, and they're fine. Some people include them rather heavily, but they're also fine because they control the rest of the energy sources. They're fat. But I have found through the years that people have more trouble controlling carbohydrates and more success controlling carbohydrates with regard to hunger, long-term satiation and satisfaction, and long-term health responses. That's my experience. And again, this is my experience. There's some good science behind it, but it's not the only way in the world. It's just one that's worked for me most of the time and my patients, clients.
We're coming into the home stretch here, so I want to make sure that folks leave with action they can take. What's the single most important message you can deliver to folks who are recognizing themselves here? I'm somebody who does not have the level of health and vitality I want to have. What do I got to do? Where do I start?
Okay. Think of the basic objective of controlling energy. So that means there's two levers for that: eating and exercising and moving. Those are the two biggest levers for controlling, storing, and utilizing energy in a healthy manner. So the two things, with regard to eating, again, eat a diet that is, and again, we can get into things like non-processed foods, only because foods that aren't processed usually provide more nutrient and satisfaction per unit of energy than things that are packaged or boxed or things like that. So eat a healthy diet, not necessarily that which is governed and dictated by the government, because we know, having followed that food pyramid, it's an arrow that's just pointing directly up for obesity and diabetes and heart disease. Eat foods that you can regulate and enjoy, but also be leery of the fact that some of these foods that are so nutrient dense have so many calories. Usually a combination of carbohydrate and fat together is a delicious way to imbibe in food. And also it's a pernicious way to try to control energy. Okay. Almost all of us have a problem with too much energy. So regulate that by controlling what you eat, how much you eat, and even when you eat. So those are the three levers. Okay. You can eat too much steak if it's just steak. You can do it. But it's harder than if you start to eat desserts. And people know, I mean, when I first started in this, Jack, I would say, people say, how should I eat? I say, don't eat crap. And in the 70s and 80s, they knew exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Desserts, chips, and people, I think, still know that. Okay. The second thing is our bodies were made to control energy for the use of exercise, of high intensity demand. A couple of times a week, we had to go out and really struggle physically to go and get food. That's hardwired. That is exercise. And I have a recommendation of a couple of times a week, 15, 20 minutes, and that's what you need for exercise. Then the third lever is activity, which is different than exercise, which means don't be sedentary. That's the best way to describe it. It may be informal, it may be walking your dog, it may be a sport or recreational activity. So be active, don't be sedentary. Exercise formally and intensely and in a structured way, a couple of times a week for a short period of time, and eat so that you can regulate the energy that you take in. And how do you measure that? By your body composition. If you are getting fatter, and that may mean in most cases getting heavier, something's wrong. Okay. And it's not eat less, move more. That's too simplistic. It's what you eat, what is the chemical response to that eating of what you eat and how you move and how you exercise. What's the metabolic chemical response to that participation? Those are the things that count. It's not the amount of exercise, and it's not just eating less. It's eating better food that give you less energy stress, and exercising so that we are more likely to utilize and burn this energy and store it in a healthy manner. That's the biggest takeaway I can give to people. And I think the nuance is important, but the general message is that.
So here's what I'm taking away from this. Think of health as a measure of how well your body processes, stores, uses, and eliminates energy sources.
Yep.
And control the levers that you are able to control, which is the energy source that you put in your pie hole, what you do in terms of activity after you put it in the pie hole. Beyond that, the storage, your body's going to store and your body's going to eliminate.
Yeah, it'll keep a healthy balance. That's what we're trying to do. I mean, if you have a 10-gallon tank and you keep trying to stuff 15 gallons of gasoline in it, the best thing that's going to happen is you're going to get your feet wet and stinky, or you might create a fire. All right. Yeah. So these things you can overwhelm the body fairly readily. And that's exactly what we're doing. The reason obesity and diabetes and Alzheimer's are skyrocketing is because we're overwhelming the ability of the organs to handle energy.
That's making sense. Okay, this is my favorite question. Let's see how good are you?
Oh my God, a lot of pressure.
Okay, so I call this the billboard question. If you had to deliver your message and you could use no more than 8 words to deliver it, what would that message be?
Get strong, live long, and die laughing.
Ah, okay. I like it. Dr. Ben, folks who want to know more about what you do, how you do it, and just learn from you, what's the best way to go about getting that?
I have a book out called 15 Minutes to Fitness that talks about exactly the things we talked about: carbohydrates, controlling energy, exercise, activity, all the lifestyle behaviors that give you the biggest return for your time and effort. And Dr. Benbow, I think drbenbow.com. I have a website, which I don't know if I've ever seen, but supposedly there's a bunch of good stuff on there. And, and on the website, it has contact info for email and even phone. If people want to, I do consults. I'm not pushing business. I'm semi-retired for 40 years, but I keep doing it, and I enjoy interacting. And then you can see me on YouTube and Low Carb USA. Probably have 10 or 12 of my presentations, and I think they're all over the place as far as I know.
All right. He is Dr. Ben Bocchicchio. This has been the Preventive Health Clinic. I would like to remind our listeners that all this contact information will be available in the show notes. Thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you next time.
Are you a healthcare practitioner eager to escape the grind of corporate medicine?
Are you ready to make a massive difference in your world? Listen up.
We are the Wizard of Ads.
For 40 years, we've created dominant brands in a variety of industries.
Now, we're bringing our magic to healthcare.
We're seeking one extraordinary healthcare practitioner to help us build the first national brand in direct primary care.
If you think you could be that person, let's talk.
Email us at health@wizardofads.com.
Tell us why you think you're the one.
That's health@wizardofads.com.